She worked behind the counter every morning before sunrise, tying her hair into a messy bun while the smell of coffee filled the small diner. Most days started the same: the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the clinking of spoons, and the sound of the doorbell as early customers walked in. To everyone who saw her, she was just another waitress, smiling politely as she took orders and carried trays from one table to another. But what no one saw was the way her eyes drifted toward the small upright piano in the corner. Whenever she had a free second, it was old, dusty, and out of tune, sitting there mostly for decoration. Still, she looked at it as if it was something precious, something she missed deeply. She wasn't always a waitress. A few years earlier, music had been her whole world. She grew up in a small town where opportunities were rare, but her hands had a gift. By the time she was 10, she could play songs just by hearing them once. Her mother used to say she was born with music inside her, that when she played, even the wind outside the window seemed to pause and listen. She dreamed of performing on grand stages, wearing a long dress, her fingers dancing over shining keys as people watched in silence. But life has a way of changing dreams without asking for permission. Her mother became sick when she was in her final year at the music academy. Hospital bills started piling up. There were days when she didn't know how they'd afford both the medicine and food. One evening, she made the decision that changed everything. She left the academy and took a job at the diner. She told her teachers she would return one day, but deep inside, she wasn't sure she ever would. The diner became her new stage. Instead of applause, she got tired smiles from customers. Instead of elegant gowns, she wore a stained apron. But she didn't complain. She needed the money, and the job helped her mother's treatment continue. Every tip, every extra shift, every long night, it was all for the woman who had believed in her since the beginning. Her co-workers liked her, mostly because she never argued and always helped when someone was falling behind. But they didn't really know her. They knew the quiet girl who worked hard and never said much about her personal life. She was kind but distant, like someone always listening to a song that no one else could hear. Sometimes, after closing time, when the lights were dim and the floor was freshly mopped, she'd sit by the piano in the corner. The manager didn't mind as long as it didn't disturb anyone. She'd play softly, her fingers moving like they remembered every note from years ago. It wasn't perfect. The keys were slightly broken and the sound wasn't clean. But when she played, her world changed. For those few minutes, she wasn't the tired waitress anymore. She was that little girl again, the one her mother once cheered for from the front row. One night, a new co-worker walked in while she was playing. He had come back to grab his phone and froze near the door. She didn't notice him at first. She was lost in the melody. When she finally did, she stopped, embarrassed. "You play?" he asked, surprised. "Just a little," she replied, wiping her hands nervously. "That didn't sound like just a little." "You're really good." She smiled shyly and shrugged. "It's just something I used to do." After that night, the rumor spread around the diner that she could play the piano beautifully. A few co-workers teased her, asking when she'd perform for the customers. She laughed it off, saying it was better to stick to her tray and coffee pot. But deep down, she missed performing. She missed being seen for who she really was. Her mother's health slowly began to improve. The doctor said she was responding to the treatment, and that brought a small spark of hope. Still, the bills never stopped coming, and the waitress kept working overtime. She rarely spent money on herself. Her shoes were worn out, her coat had a tear, but she didn't care. Music was her luxury now, something she could only touch in the quiet hours when the world wasn't watching. Sometimes, regular customers would notice her humming softly as she wiped the tables or poured coffee. Her voice was gentle but full of emotion. One of them once told her, "You should be on stage, not in a diner." She smiled, thanked him, and went back to work. Compliments didn't pay the rent, but they did warm her heart for a moment. Then came a night that would quietly start to change her life, though she didn't know it yet. The diner's owner announced they had booked a private dinner for a group of wealthy people from the city. It was a big deal for the small-town restaurant, a chance to impress clients who could bring in more business. Everyone was told to be on their best behavior, dress neatly, and keep the service fast and flawless. The waitress didn't think much of it. For her, it was just another shift. More trays, more dishes, more tired smiles. When the guests arrived, the air changed immediately. They were dressed in expensive clothes, laughing loudly, making comments about how charming the little diner was. The waitress greeted them with her usual polite smile and started taking their orders. They treated her like part of the furniture, barely looking at her except to wave her over for more wine or another plate. Halfway through the evening, she accidentally bumped into a chair while carrying a tray. One of the men laughed loudly, saying, "Careful there. Don't turn our dinner into a performance." The table erupted in laughter. Her cheeks burned, but she forced a smile and apologized. Inside, she felt small, like all the hard work and quiet strength she carried meant nothing to them. She didn't know that at another table, an older man had been watching the scene quietly. He wasn't laughing. He noticed the way she handled the embarrassment, not with anger or tears, but with quiet grace. He saw something familiar in her eyes, a kind of dignity that hardship can't destroy. Later that night, when the dinner was almost over, one of the guests jokingly pointed to the old piano in the corner. "Hey, maybe the waitress can play something for us. It'll make the night more entertaining." The group laughed again. Someone added, "Yeah, let's see if she knows anything other than carrying plates." Her manager quickly stepped in, apologizing. "I'm sorry, she's just staff. We don't offer live music." But she said softly, "It's okay." The room quieted for a second. She hesitated. Part of her wanted to disappear, but another part, buried deep for too long, whispered, "Play." She walked to the piano. Her hands trembled as she sat down. The instrument was out of tune, dusty, neglected, just like her dream. But she pressed one key, then another, and soon a melody began to fill the room. It was gentle, slow, full of feeling. At first, the guests laughed quietly, assuming it was a joke. But as the melody grew, so did the silence. Her fingers moved gracefully as if the piano had been waiting for her all these years. The sound wasn't perfect, but it had soul, the kind that pulls you in without words. For those few minutes, time seemed to stop. When she finished, there was no laughter left in the room. One man finally clapped softly. Another whispered, "Who is she?" She stood up embarrassed and said quickly, "I should get back to work." She returned to her tables as if nothing had happened. But inside, her heart was beating faster than ever. That night, as she closed the diner, the older man approached her quietly. He introduced himself as someone who used to teach music at a conservatory before retiring. He told her, "You don't play like a waitress. You play like someone who's lived through music and life." She didn't know what to say. He smiled kindly and asked, "Would you ever consider performing again?" She laughed nervously. "Oh, I don't think I could. That part of my life is over." He shook his head. "No, it's just waiting." When she walked home that night, the sky was dark but filled with stars. The streets were quiet, and the sound of her shoes on the pavement echoed softly. She thought about his words over and over. It's just waiting. At home, her mother was asleep in the small living room, wrapped in blankets. The waitress stood by her side, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. She whispered, "Maybe one day, Mom. Maybe one day I'll play again." Then she sat by the window looking out into the night. Somewhere deep inside her, the spark she thought had died began to glow again. Small, fragile, but alive. And though she didn't know it yet, that night had quietly opened the first door to something far bigger than she could imagine. The morning after the dinner, the small diner felt the same as always. The smell of toast, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the soft chatter of regulars filling the air. But for her, everything felt a little different. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened the night before, about how her hands had shaken, how the keys had felt under her fingers, and how, for those few minutes, she wasn't just a waitress anymore. Still, she tried to push the memory away. Life didn't slow down just because she had a moment of courage. There were bills to pay, tables to clean, and her mother's medicine to refill. The world didn't care about a waitress who could play the piano. But as she took orders that morning, she noticed something strange. The same group of guests from the previous night had come back. Not all of them, but 2 of the women and 1 man. They sat at a corner booth, talking quietly. When she approached their table, she felt a flicker of unease. She smiled politely and asked what they'd like to order. One of the women looked up and smirked. "You're the one who played the piano last night, right?" She nodded slowly, unsure of what to expect. The woman laughed softly. "That was unexpected. I didn't know they let the staff entertain guests now." The man with her added, "She was actually good, for a diner girl." Their words weren't cruel, but they carried that tone, the one that made her chest tighten. She forced a smile and said, "Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it." Then she walked away before her voice could tremble. The other waitresses had heard about her little performance, and throughout the day, they teased her gently. "You really played for them? I can't believe you had the guts." She laughed it off, pretending it didn't matter. But inside, something was changing. The music that had once been just a quiet escape was now tugging at her heart again, calling her back to the life she once dreamed of. That evening, when she returned home, her mother noticed the faraway look in her eyes. "You played again, didn't you?" her mother asked with a knowing smile. "How did you know?" she said softly. "A mother always knows," her mother replied. "You look lighter, even if you're trying to hide it." She sat beside her mother and told her about the dinner, about the laughter, about the old piano, and how for a moment everything around her disappeared. Her mother listened quietly, her eyes shining with pride. "You were born to play," she whispered. Don't ever forget that. Those words stayed with her for days, but not everyone was as kind. A few days later, the diner's manager called her into the back office. He looked uncomfortable as he spoke. "Listen," he said, rubbing his forehead, "about that piano thing the other night. I know you meant well, but it could have gone wrong. Some customers didn't take it seriously. One of them even joked online about the singing waitress. I just don't want the diner to become some kind of sideshow." Her heart sank. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, sighing. "You're a good worker, just stick to your tables, all right? Leave the piano alone during business hours." She nodded and left the room, trying to keep her expression calm. But once she stepped outside, she felt that familiar ache, the one she'd felt when she gave up music years ago. She thought she was past that kind of pain, but it had come back easily, like it had just been waiting. That night she didn't play after closing. She just wiped the tables, stacked the chairs, and went home in silence. The next few weeks blurred together. The routine was the same. Customers, orders, dishes, and exhaustion. The only thing different was the way people looked at her now. Some regulars smiled knowingly, asking, "When are we getting another concert?" Others just whispered or joked quietly, not realizing she could hear. One Friday night, the diner was packed again. The same group of wealthy guests had returned for another private dinner. When she saw their names on the reservation list, her stomach tightened. She thought about asking to switch shifts, but she needed the extra money. When they arrived, they greeted her with forced smiles. The same man from before grinned and said, "Ah, our little pianist is here. Maybe she'll give us an encore." His friends laughed, and she managed a polite laugh in return. As she served their table, they kept making small comments. "Careful with that tray, wouldn't want those talented hands to slip. Maybe she'll play us something classy this time." The laughter around her table felt heavy, but she didn't let it show. She kept her head high, reminding herself that she'd faced worse. Later in the evening, one of the women, the one who had smirked at her before, asked, "So do you still play? Or was that a one-time show?" She smiled faintly and said, "I still play sometimes. Just for myself." The woman tilted her head, pretending to be impressed. "That's sweet. It's good to have hobbies, isn't it?" Something about that word on hobbies hit her harder than it should have. To her, music wasn't a hobby. It was a part of who she was. But to them, it was just a little trick, something small and unimportant. When she brought out the dessert tray, she overheard them talking about her again. "You know," one of the men said, "if she's really good, she should try out at the city's open recital next month. Maybe she'll get discovered." His tone wasn't kind. It was mocking. The table burst into laughter again. She felt her cheeks burn. Still, she placed the plates down carefully and said softly, "Enjoy your dessert." Then she walked away, her chest tight. At the counter, she took a deep breath, trying to shake off the sting. But the sound of their laughter stayed in her mind, echoing louder than the music she used to play. She didn't notice that the same older man from before was sitting a few tables away. He was alone this time, quietly observing everything. When she came to refill his coffee, he looked up and said gently, "Don't let them make you forget who you are." She froze for a second, surprised. "You were here last time," she said quietly. He nodded. "And I meant what I said then. You have something special. Don't hide it because others don't understand." His words felt like a small light in a dark room. When the night finally ended and the guests left, she sat by the window of the empty diner. The world outside was quiet, and the reflection of the old piano shimmered faintly in the glass. She stared at it for a long time. Her fingers itched to play again, but she didn't move. Not yet. A few minutes later, the older man approached her again before leaving. He placed a small card on the table. "If you ever decide to play again," he said, "come to this address next weekend. It's a community recital. Nothing fancy, but it's full of people who love real music." She looked at the card, an invitation with the address of a small town hall. "I don't know if I can," she said hesitantly. "It's been so long," he smiled. "Then it's time to remind yourself that you still can." After he left, she sat in silence, staring at the card. Part of her wanted to tear it up, afraid of what it might mean. Another part, the one that still believed in music, and whispered, "Go." When she got home, her mother was awake, sitting on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. "You're late," her mother said softly. "Busy night?" She nodded and sat down beside her, handing her the card. "Someone invited me to a recital." Her mother looked at it carefully, then at her. "Are you going?" "I don't know. I'm not sure I belong there anymore." Her mother smiled sadly. "You've always belonged where music lives. Don't let fear make you forget that." That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. Her mind replayed everything. The laughter, the applause, the kind words from the old man, and her mother's gentle encouragement. By morning, she had made her decision. She would go, not to prove anything to the people who mocked her, but to remind herself that her dream still existed. The following week, between shifts, she practiced quietly at home on her old keyboard. The keys stuck, the sound was uneven, but she didn't care. Her fingers trembled at first, rusty from years of neglect. But slowly the music came back, soft, beautiful, and full of feeling. Her mother listened from the couch, eyes closed, smiling. "That's my girl," she whispered. Each night after work she practiced a little more. She didn't tell anyone at the diner. The world didn't need to know yet. This was hers. Something pure and fragile that she wanted to protect. By the end of the week, she packed her small sheet of music, took the bus across town, and stood outside the town hall where the recital was being held. She felt nervous, more than she had in years. Through the doors she could hear people chatting, the sound of instruments being tuned and laughter echoing down the hallway. She took a deep breath, clutching the old invitation card. Then quietly, she stepped inside. She had no idea that this small step, this simple decision to walk through that door, would be the beginning of a night that would change everything she thought she knew about her life, her music, and herself. The small town hall smelled faintly of old wood and polished floors. The walls were lined with faded posters from past performances, community plays, student recitals, charity concerts. As she stepped inside, she felt a wave of nerves wash over her. She hadn't stood in a place like this for years. The last time she had performed on stage, she was a student surrounded by other young musicians. Back then, the audience was full of supportive faces. Teachers, parents, people who clapped even when someone made mistakes. Now she felt out of place, dressed simply in her work clothes, holding her music sheet in trembling hands. At the front desk, a friendly older woman greeted her. "Hello, dear. Are you here for the recital?" She nodded. "Wonderful. Name, please." She hesitated for a moment before giving it. The woman smiled warmly and checked the list. "Ah, yes. You're scheduled for the third performance. Don't worry, it's very relaxed here. We all just love to listen to good music." She nodded again and took a seat in the corner. Around her, people were chatting and laughing, a mix of children, teenagers, and older musicians. Some held violins or guitars. Others flipped through sheet music. It was a humble setting, but it was filled with the same energy she remembered from the academy, the quiet excitement of people who simply loved music. As she waited, her heart pounded in her chest. She tried to steady her breathing. What if she forgot her notes? What if her hands shook too much? What if she wasn't good enough anymore? Those thoughts swirled in her mind until she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "You've played through harder days. You can do this." When her name was called, she stood up, legs unsteady but determined. The stage was small, just a wooden platform with a single piano and a spotlight that cast a soft glow. The audience was close, their faces kind and expectant. She sat down and ran her fingers over the keys. They were smooth and cool to the touch. She took a deep breath, remembering her mother's voice saying, "Play like the music is your truth." The first note came softly, then another, then the melody began to flow. Her hands moved with a mix of fear and freedom, uncertain but full of emotion. The hall grew silent, the kind of silence that comes when people truly listen. Every note seemed to carry a piece of her story. The struggle, the long nights at the diner, the laughter that had cut deep, the quiet hope she held onto for years. By the time she reached the last part, she could feel tears in her own eyes. When the final note faded, the room was still for a moment. Then the applause came, gentle at first, then growing louder. She looked up, surprised to see people standing, clapping sincerely. It wasn't a crowd of rich guests pretending to care. These were ordinary people, and they meant it. After the performance, several musicians came to speak with her. "That was beautiful," one young man said. "You played with so much feeling." Another woman added, "I haven't heard something that genuine in a long time." She thanked them quietly, unsure how to respond. Compliments like that felt foreign after so many years of being invisible. Then the older man from the diner appeared from the back of the hall, smiling proudly. "I knew you'd come," he said. "You played just like I imagined it, from the heart." She smiled, this time with real warmth. "Thank you." "I almost didn't," he nodded. "That's how courage works. It only shows up when you think you've lost it." They sat together for a while as the next performer prepared. He told her about the small group that organized these community recitals. Musicians, teachers, and people who believed in giving hidden talents a chance. "We're not professionals," he said, "but we know passion when we hear it. You belong here." Those words sank deep into her. You belong here. She hadn't felt like she belonged anywhere in a long time. As the evening ended, he handed her another card. "Next month, there's a bigger event downtown, a charity concert. We'd love for you to perform there. You'd be helping raise money for local music students. Think about it." She held the card tightly. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." He smiled kindly. "You'll never feel ready. Do it anyway." That night when she got home, her mother was waiting eagerly. "So?" she asked, eyes shining. She smiled and said, "I played." Her mother reached out, squeezing her hand. "And how did it feel?" "Like I was alive again," she whispered. Her mother smiled softly, tears glimmering. "That's all I ever wanted for you." Over the next few weeks, her life took on a new rhythm. She still worked long shifts at the diner, but now her evenings were different. Every night after work, she practiced. Sometimes she used the diner's piano after hours, when the lights were dim and no one was around. Other nights, she played quietly at home, her mother listening from the couch. Her co-workers noticed the change in her. She smiled more, her steps lighter, her eyes brighter. They didn't know exactly what had happened, but they could tell something had awakened inside her. One evening, as she was leaving work, the manager stopped her. "Hey," he said, scratching his head. "I saw that video online. Someone filmed you playing at that community thing, right?" Her eyes widened. "What?" "Yeah," he said with a small grin. "Don't worry, it's good publicity. People are calling you the Waitress pianist." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Someone had filmed her performance? She checked online later that night, and there it was. A simple video uploaded by an audience member. The title read, "Waitress from local diner plays heartfelt piano piece." It wasn't fancy, just her sitting at the piano under the soft light, but the comments were full of encouragement. Her music touched my heart. This is what real art sounds like. She deserves a chance to be heard. Reading those words made her eyes fill with tears. She never thought strangers would listen to her again. Not like this. A week later, she received a call from the same man who had invited her to the first recital. "You've been getting some attention," he said cheerfully. "A local journalist wants to write a small piece about you for the paper. Would you be comfortable with that?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I'm just a waitress." He chuckled softly. "No, you're a musician who happens to be a waitress right now. Don't let a job title decide who you are." The article came out a few days later. From diner to piano stage, the unexpected talent who touched the town. It was simple, but heartfelt. The story of a young woman who never gave up her dream, even when life forced her to take a different path. People started coming to the diner not just for food, but to meet her. Some asked if she would play again. Others just wanted to shake her hand. The same customers who once barely noticed her now spoke to her with respect. The wealthy guests who had mocked her also saw the article. One of them left a comment online pretending to be supportive, but she didn't care anymore. She had learned that real respect came from kindness, not money. Her mother's health continued to improve. She seemed happier too, watching her daughter's confidence return. "See," her mother said one morning, "the world remembers people who stay true to themselves." As the date of the charity concert drew closer, she grew nervous again. This event would be different. Larger audience, more attention, higher stakes. But this time she wasn't running from fear. She used it as fuel. Each day after work she practiced her piece. It was something she had composed herself, a melody built from memories of her mother, her struggles and her small moments of hope. It wasn't written on any official music sheet. It came straight from her heart. The older man, now her mentor, visited her a few times to listen. "You've grown," he said proudly after one session. "This piece, it's yours. No one else could play it the same way." She smiled shyly. "It's not perfect," he shook his head. "It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be real." As the concert day approached, her nerves came back, but her mother's words kept her steady. "You've already made it this far. Don't stop now." Finally, the night arrived. She stood backstage, clutching her hands together. The sound of the audience filtered through the curtain. Laughter, whispers, the quiet shuffle of people finding their seats. Her heart pounded like a drum. She peeked through the curtain and saw the crowd. Dozens of faces, lights shining above the stage. For a moment, doubt crept in again. What if I fail? What if I make a mistake? Then she remembered where she came from. The small diner, the spilled drinks, the laughter, the quiet nights playing alone. She had faced worse than this. When her name was announced, she stepped onto the stage, bathed in warm light. The piano gleamed softly under it, waiting for her. She took a deep breath and sat down, feeling the world fade around her. The audience quieted. She pressed the first key and the music began. It wasn't just a song, it was her story. Every note carried a memory. Every pause a moment of pain or love. Her fingers moved with confidence now, her heart guiding them. And for the first time in a long, long while, she felt free. She didn't see the tears in the audience, the people recording with their phones, or the proud smile of her mentor in the front row. She only felt the music, and it was enough. When the last note ended, there was silence, the kind that holds everything in it. Then slowly, applause filled the hall, growing louder and louder until the room echoed with it. She looked up, stunned, her hands trembling over the keys. In that moment, she realized something simple but powerful. The world had finally heard her, not as a waitress, not as someone struggling to survive, but as the musician she had always been, and that, she knew, was just the beginning. The day of the charity concert arrived with a quiet tension that filled her chest like a heavy drum. She woke early, before the sun, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. For weeks she had practiced replaying the music in her mind, memorizing every note, every pause, every emotion that the piece demanded. Still, as she got dressed in her simple yet neat outfit, she wondered if she could do it. If she could stand in front of a crowd and let the music carry her story. Her mother had already been awake, making breakfast in their small kitchen. She hummed softly, the familiar sound warming the air. "You're nervous," her mother said without looking up. "I am," she admitted, taking a seat at the table. "What if I mess up?" Her mother smiled, setting down a plate of toast and eggs. "Then you mess up beautifully. People will feel your honesty, and that matters more than perfection. Just play from your heart." Those words settled into her mind as she ate, steadying the trembling in her hands. After breakfast, she carefully packed her sheet music and walked to the bus stop. The city felt larger than her small town, taller and noisier, but she didn't let it scare her. She had survived bigger challenges than a few unfamiliar streets. When she arrived at the concert hall, she was awed by the size of it. The building was grand, with shining lights reflecting off polished floors. Inside, the stage was bigger than any she had played on before. Rows of chairs stretched back, filled with people who had come to support the event. Music lovers, F.A. Milia's local news reporters and volunteers. Backstage, she took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Musicians were warming up, tuning instruments and chatting. Some of them wore elegant dresses or tailored suits. Others carried themselves with the quiet confidence of long experience. She felt small in comparison. A waitress who had learned to survive life's hardships rather than to shine in polished halls. But then she reminded herself why she was there. Not to compete, not to impress anyone, but to play, to tell her story with music. Her mentor from the community recital appeared beside her. "You're ready," he said simply. "Trust the music. Trust yourself." She nodded, gripping her music sheet. "I hope so," he smiled. "You will. I promise." As she walked toward the stage, the murmurs of the audience grew louder. Some people noticed her and whispered, "Is she the diner pianist?" Others seemed unaware of her story. She didn't mind. All that mattered was the piano waiting for her. The first note she was about to play, the announcer introduced her to the audience, speaking with enthusiasm about the young woman who had traveled from a small town to share her music and help raise funds for local students. The applause was polite, encouraging, and she felt her heart leap. She bowed slightly, then sat at the piano bench. The spotlight cast a warm glow over the keys, and she took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered above the piano. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the quiet nights she had spent practicing alone, the spilled drinks at the diner, the laughter that once hurt her, the words of encouragement from her mother, and the gentle faith of her mentor. And then she began. The first note was soft, cautious, like testing the water before diving in. The second note followed, more confident. Soon the melody unfolded, slow at first, delicate, then building with emotion. Every key she pressed carried a memory, of struggle, of love, of sacrifice, and of hope. She poured herself into the music, letting it flow from her heart through her fingers. As she played, she became unaware of the audience. The hall seemed to shrink until it was just her, the piano, and the story she was telling through each note. The music was imperfect in a technical sense. The keys were new, the acoustics slightly different. But that imperfection made it human. It made it real. The audience was captivated. People leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide, listening to the music that spoke more than words ever could. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody touch old wounds or hidden dreams. Others wiped away tears, moved by the raw emotion pouring from her. Halfway through, she felt her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't stop. She pressed on, letting the music guide her, trusting that the hours of practice, the late nights, and the years of longing had prepared her for this moment. Each crescendo carried her strength, each soft passage carried her vulnerability. At one point, she looked up slightly and noticed her mother sitting near the front, smiling proudly, tears shining in her eyes. She felt a surge of love and determination. Every hardship, every lonely night, every sacrifice had led to this. She was no longer invisible. Her story was being heard in the language she had always known best. The final notes approached, softening like a gentle sigh after a long journey. Her hands moved gracefully, almost dancing across the keys, bringing the music to a tender, heartfelt conclusion. She held the last note, letting it linger in the air before releasing it. Silence followed, the kind of silence that is heavy, full, and almost sacred. Then the applause began. It started slowly, tentative at first, then building like a wave until the entire hall was clapping and cheering. People stood, some whistling, some shouting words of praise. She blinked, stunned, her hands still hovering above the keys, unsure if it had really happened. Her mentor came forward, clapping the loudest. "You did it," he said, smiling proudly. "I told you. You just had to trust yourself." She stood slowly, overwhelmed by the reaction. Audience members came forward, some shaking her hand, others asking for autographs or pictures. A few even left flowers on the piano. She laughed softly, disbelief and joy tangled together in her chest. Later, she learned that a local news reporter had recorded the performance. Within hours, videos of her recital spread across social media. People commented, shared, and praised her talent. The video showed a simple young woman at a piano, but her expression, her hands, and the music spoke louder than anything else could. By the end of the night, she was exhausted but elated. Backstage, her mentor handed her a small notebook. "Keep this," he said. It's for all the pieces you'll create, all the stories you'll tell through music. Don't stop now. She held it tightly, feeling the weight of possibility. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream openly without fear. The audience had seen her truth, had felt her story, and had celebrated it. She realized that this was only the beginning. Her mother wrapped her in a tight hug. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You shone tonight. I've never been prouder." Tears filled her eyes as she held her mother close. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied softly. Even after the applause faded and the hall emptied, she lingered by the piano, touching the keys gently. Each note reminded her of the journey that had brought her here. The spilled drinks, the long nights at the diner, the people who had laughed at her, the strangers who believed in her. It all led to this one moment where her music could speak freely, where her story could be felt, not just heard. As she left the concert hall that night, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, she knew something had changed forever. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a musician, a storyteller, someone who had faced doubt and fear and had come out shining. The world had finally listened, and it was just the beginning. The days after the charity concert were unlike anything she had experienced before. People began recognizing her on the street. Some whispered her name. Others smiled, remembering the music that had moved them. She still worked at the diner, still poured coffee and carried trays, but the world around her had shifted. Something intangible had changed. People didn't just see her as a waitress anymore. They saw the quiet strength in her eyes, the depth behind her gentle smile, the talent that had finally been noticed. The first message arrived early one morning, while she was wiping down tables before opening. It was from a music school in the city, someone who had seen the concert online. The message was simple. "We were moved by your performance. We would like to offer you a scholarship to continue your music studies. If you are interested, please contact us." Her hands shook as she held the phone. She read the message again, then again. Could it really be real? For years she had dreamed of this. Not wealth, not fame, but the chance to dedicate herself to music fully, to be seen for who she truly was. And now it was here, almost like a miracle. Her mother had come into the diner just as she was staring at the message. "What is it?" her mother asked, peering over her shoulder. She handed the phone to her. They want me to study music again. Full scholarship." Her mother's eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Oh, my heart," she whispered. "I never thought I'd see this day." She hugged her tightly, holding her as if to make sure it was real. "All those years, all those sacrifices, they've led to this. You belong there." Word of her scholarship spread quickly in the small town. The diner became a place where people came to meet the waitress who had become a musician, the young woman who had turned her life around. Some came out of curiosity, others came out of genuine admiration, but all of them left inspired. Even the guests who had once mocked her returned, but this time they were cautious, hesitant, almost embarrassed. One of them approached her table quietly, lowering their voice. I saw your concert online," they said. "I didn't realize. You're incredible." She smiled gently, not with pride, but with calm understanding. "Thank you," she said simply. She didn't hold grudges. Those moments of mockery had only made her stronger, had forced her to keep her love for music alive even when others didn't see it. And now she could finally move forward without looking back. The scholarship required her to move to the city temporarily. It was a daunting step, leaving her mother, leaving the diner, leaving the life she had known for years. But her mother insisted. "Go," she said. "Go play, learn, and live your dream. I'll be here cheering for you every day." Packing was bittersweet. She carried her music sheets carefully, wrapped her small collection of personal items, and left the keys to the apartment where she had practiced alone for so many nights. She hugged her mother one last time, promising to call every day and send letters as if she were still a child leaving home for the first time. The city was overwhelming at first. Tall buildings, crowded streets, the constant hum of traffic. Everything was loud, fast, and unfamiliar. But when she arrived at the music school, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The halls smelled faintly of polished wood and old books. The classrooms were lined with pianos, and every corner seemed to hum with the energy of music. Her instructors were kind but demanding, pushing her to explore techniques she had never practiced before, to challenge herself in ways she didn't think she could. Some days were frustrating. She stumbled over pieces she thought she knew perfectly. Her fingers tangled in unfamiliar rhythms, her confidence tested. But through it all, she remembered the concerts, the diners, the small town that had never truly seen her. She remembered the night she had played for strangers who had been moved to tears. And slowly, slowly, she improved. Her fingers moved. Faster. Her touch became more confident, her expression more deliberate. She was no longer just playing the notes, she was telling stories through them. One day, a renowned composer visited the school to listen to students. He sat quietly as she played, his face unreadable. When she finished, he didn't clap immediately. She held her breath, unsure how she had done. Then he stood, smiling broadly. "You have something rare," he said. "Not just talent, but heart. Keep playing, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The world needs to hear your music." His words felt like a warm breeze, brushing away the lingering doubts that had shadowed her for years. She left the room feeling light, as if she were floating above the city streets. Back home, she would sometimes call her mother, describing her classes, her pieces, and the people she met. Her mother listened patiently, proud and sometimes teary, never once asking her to slow down or worry. She encouraged every dream, every note, every fear that her daughter voiced. Months passed. She performed at small recitals organized by the school. Each time the audiences were different, but the feeling was the same. The connection, the recognition, the quiet thrill of being heard. Her confidence grew, but she never forgot the diner, the small town, and the people who had first given her a chance when no one else had. One evening after a performance, she returned to her small apartment, exhausted but exhilarated. She sat by the window looking at the city lights and thought about how far she had come. She thought about the nights when she had played alone, when she had feared that no one would ever listen. She remembered the laughter, the mockery, the small encouragements from strangers who believed in her, and she realized that each step, no matter how painful or small, had brought her to this moment. She thought about the diner, now almost a memory. But it wasn't gone. It lived in her hands, in the way she played, in the way she treated people. She realized that her music was richer because of her life, because of the struggles, the sacrifices, and the people who had shaped her journey. Then came the news she had been waiting for silently. A local music festival wanted her to perform as a featured artist. The festival was larger than anything she had imagined, with music lovers traveling from nearby towns and cities. She was nervous, but this time the nerves felt different. They were not fear, but anticipation, excitement, and a sense of belonging. On the day of the festival, she stood backstage, fingers hovering above the piano keys, heart pounding in a steady rhythm. She looked out at the audience, rows of people, lights shining, faces eager to listen. For a moment she thought about all the people who had doubted her, all the people who had laughed or ignored her. Then she pushed the thought aside. Tonight wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about playing for herself, for her mother, for everyone who had quietly believed in her. She began to play. The notes filled the air, delicate at first, then soaring, carrying the emotion she had bottled up for years. The audience fell silent, caught in the current of her music. Some closed their eyes, some leaned forward, and a few wiped tears from their cheeks. The music spoke in a language no words could match. When the final note faded, there was a moment of silence, a breath held in awe, before the hall erupted into applause. She looked up, tears in her eyes, and realized that she had finally come home, not to a place, but to herself. After the performance, a music agent approached her. "You have something very special," he said. "We'd like to help you record a professional album. Your story, your music, it's exactly what the world needs right now." Her heart raced. It felt unreal, almost too much, but she smiled and nodded. I'd love that." She returned home that night, calling her mother immediately. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, I'm going to record my own music. People want to hear it. They want my story through the piano." Her mother cried softly, holding the phone as if she could feel her daughter's happiness from afar. "I always knew you would," she whispered. I always knew you belonged in the music world." In the weeks and months that followed, her life transformed. She traveled to recording studios, performed at more concerts, and shared her music with thousands of people online. But no matter how far she went, she never forgot the diner, the small piano she had practiced on, or the quiet encouragement that had started it all. Her journey had begun with spilled drinks, laughter, and doubt. It had moved through quiet nights, small recitals, and the patient faith of strangers who believed in her. And now, she was living her dream, a dream that had waited patiently for her, just as her mentor had said it would. She realized something simple yet profound. Talent is important, but heart, persistence, and courage make a life worth remembering. And sometimes the world only needs one person brave enough to play their truth for it to finally listen. Her music was no longer just a secret, a hobby, or a hidden dream. It was her life, her voice, and her gift to the world. And in that she found not just success but joy, purpose, and peace. The waitress who had once carried trays with nervous smiles had become the musician who carried hearts with every note. And as she sat at the piano one quiet evening looking out at the city lights, she finally understood the truth. The world could not ignore her anymore, and she would never let herself be invisible again.